So what you're looking at here is a very old computer program called Derive. It was developed by the TI people, and there's really nothing quite like it. Mathematica is sort of the more improved version, but it's that's a very expensive program. So what you're looking at here is what looks like a parametric equation, right? So we have something that's going around like that. That's sort of a typical parametric equation. Maybe over here we have some sines and cosines and things. So it looks like a fairly standard type of equation, but if you look at the equations themselves, right, instead of having two components of the vector, 1, 2, has a third component of the vector. So what that tells you already is that you're not really looking at a 2D shape. You're really looking at a 3D shape. And what this program can do fairly amazingly is really render that 3D-ness. I'll show you what I mean. So I'm just turning it. We can also set it to like auto rotate. There it is rotating. So this figure is sine of 2t, cosine of t, cosine of 2t. So it's a lot like a Lissajous figure, except it has three vector components, so it has 3 dimensions. It's a 3-dimensional Lissajous figure. You get a sense of what that looks like. Let's look at some of these other ones. So I was trying to get ones that display nicely, and even though this program does this fairly well, it's a fairly difficult thing to do. It's kind of amazing that I used to use this to teach back in the 90s, and it's still really sort of the only program that can do this well. And it takes a little while to produce a graph. There's a graph. All right, this one is sine of 2t, cosine of 3t, cosine of 2t. So if I rotate that around to see what it looks like, looks like it's pretty cool is what it looks like. So you can sort of get the idea that there's a solid object here, and that's what this is. It's really like a string in space. So those parametric equations that we studied were all 2-dimensional, so they only describe a path or a string or a movement in 2 dimensions. But it's clear that most things in the world move in 3 dimensions. So, can you describe a complex 3-dimensional trajectory that's happening in space or something? And, the answer is yes. You just add a third component to your vector. Easy as pie. This last one is sine of 2t. I think I got time to do one more. Sine of 2t, cosine of 3t, sine of 0.5t. If anybody finds any more current software that can do this, I would be totally happy to see it. So, like if you look at it here, this looks like an unbroken figure, but we already saw from another angle, you can see where the two ends are broken. This is because of how I've set the domain of the parameter goes from negative pi to pi, and since we have a sine of 0.5t, that particular part of the function is not completed. However, with the resolution that we're using here, to complete the figure sort of overtaxes the capacity for resolution that the computer has. This is a 20-year-old computer. It, by the way, is also my studio computer, on which I do all my SoundCloud recordings. So, but you can see, how this is a fascinating kind of application, just a slight modification of something you already knew. All I have to do is throw in one more dimension. So one thing that's cool is when you guys go into Calc 3, whether you do that next year or you redo some of your calc beforehand, this is what you're going to be looking at, is taking all the calc that we did in 2D and throwing it into 3D. Yeah. So by the way, since I mentioned that we're in my recording studio here, here's the engine of that recording studio. Some of my boxes. There's my drum machine. There's my keys. This is one of my guitars right there. Got my other guitars in my case here. You're gonna see me in there. It's got my bass and my acoustic in there. Yeah. Carvin amp. PV amp. All right. That's the last video I'm making for you guys. I hope You enjoy it.